Morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time you're tuning in the program called What's Going On FlintTalkRadio.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program that comes on every Monday at 2 o'clock from 2 to 3. And, of course, you can tune us in at your convenience on Flint's most watched podcast studio in the city of Flint, Genesee County, the state of Michigan, and soon to be worldwide. We always tell a story here, and we do believe that is going to happen. It may not be in necessarily our lifetimes, but we're going to keep working on it and then pass it on to the next generation, let them work on it. I want you to watch all the programs here at FlintTalkRadio.com, and hope you are enjoying it as much as we are enjoying bringing it to you, because we are working very hard here at the studio, and those behind the scenes you don't see, but you get a lot of credit for what we do here. People like John Wilson and others who are the voice in the background. Every once in a while when we get it wrong, it doesn't happen that often, but when we get it wrong behind the scenes, they will in fact put the timeout sign on and check the books out, look at the internet and find out where we went wrong, and then make the correction right here on the air. And we are going to do as much as we can to be accurate here. And so we are going to do our homework before we come on the air. I want you to stay tuned for the next hour. Have a lot of things I want to talk about, and I don't know if we'll get around to all of them. I found out when I start to talk about what are we going to talk about today on the program, and we don't get around to it, then I'm feeling like I got egg on my face. And so I'll just say we have 3 topics we want to discuss, and let you find out as the program unfolds what those topics are. But I must start out with the Facebook, because I think that's where the action is happening right now in terms of the wide array of things that are coming up on the Facebook network and the number of topics that are being discussed there, some of which I'm trying to initiate myself. And I'm doing a lot of posting, do at least one post every day. And I've been posting a little bit on something that I hope will not go out of the news until we get this thing straightened out of what happened in Florida. I don't think the real story has yet begun to unfold in Florida, because I think we got to have some people disbarred around the George Zimmerman trial. And I think that the governor down there in Florida, Rick Scott, and this is a news alert, I think that Rick Scott should be impeached based upon his role in the George Zimmerman trial, because it looks like from behind the scenes that he was the one that was a mover and shaker, maybe taking some orders from Washington in terms of Eric Holder's office and putting pressure to bear upon the state attorney, Wolfsinger, who was pushed over to the side. In fact, what Wolfsinger did was a step down, claiming a conflict of interest, which has never been explained, nor has anyone documented what the conflict of interest was. And as I said on my network, that he had never met George Zimmerman and never met the family nor talked to his father, any of those persons. So where was the conflict of interest? And it seems to me that what happened was that he just was not going to bring charges against George Zimmerman, and pressure was put to bear upon him, and he just simply decided to stand down, to not stand his ground. And out of that came Angela Corey, who was put in his place as state attorney, and she, in fact, did bring in charges against George Zimmerman, where others had decided that they didn't have enough evidence to go with bringing forth these charges and put this man on trial. I think that that's the going rate that went on in this trial, and I think the prosecutors, whose names I was trying to think of last week but have them down now, and that would be Bernie Della Rianda, John Guy, and Richard Mantell, the 3 prosecutors in this case. I think those persons need to be disbarred from their role in this case going forward for trial. It really putting a person in harm's way of being put in jail from 10 to 30 years on a trumped-up charge, which they knew was a bogus charge. And part of the reason why the case looked so weak before the public was because it was a weak case before the public, although there was some question of their competency brought to bear, and on the surface also, that wasn't a told story. Much of it was the fact they were trying to do the impossible, prove a negative, which was that a person did not have the right to exercise his rights under the laws that had been passed by the state of Florida, which is an outrage that you pass a law, then those who are working underneath the law, within the confines of the law, and are in fact violating the law by exercising it. Somebody explain that one to me. But that's exactly what was going on. And when the full story gets out, it is only a matter of time before what we began to look behind the scenes at what really went on here, because no lie can live forever. And when we found out what really was going on behind the scenes and what really was the reason why these charges were brought to bear, I think we're going to have some accountability put in place. And at that point, heads are going to roll, as they should have already begun to do. We're going to unravel this case. We're not going to leave it until we get to the bottom of it, because what happened in Florida potentially could have jeopardized the entire country. If they had gotten away with what they were doing down there in Florida, then there's not one person in this country that would have been safe, because all you had to do was, in fact, make a case in the street, bring the vigilantes out, put shoppers up there on top of a microphone, holler that an injustice has been served by not bringing somebody to heel and to court, and then you maintain the arrest out of political motivations. And before you know, we have somebody on trial fighting for their life, fighting for their freedom in a trumped-up case that is politically motivated. In other words, we have politics now being invading the courtroom. And we cannot stand for that in a society where due process of law is supposed to prevail, where we're supposed to have equal protection of the laws under the 5th and 14th Amendments. And we don't have that to prevail in cases like this, when those laws are under attack by what happened in Florida. We have to look at this, and we've got to get to the bottom of it and bring about some resolution of it. So we're still on that just a little bit in terms of writing about it, because I don't think that the real story has begun to be told yet, and I don't think we got to the bottom of it, although I was very happy to see that a man that was innocent was not sent to jail for a considerable period of time for, in fact, exercising his rights under the laws of the state in which these laws were, in fact, passed, where, in fact, there's no state that talks about you don't have the right to defend yourself. It's not standing your ground. It's the right to self-defense, the right to defend your own life against those who are potentially trying to take your life. You have the right to defend your life. That's just the right of self-defense, which you're not given that right by the state. It may well endorse it, but the right to self-defense and defend your own life is a right you're born with. And if we let these children live long enough, they would in fact validate that if we can get them out of these abortion clinics, so they'll have the right to their lives. The only reason they don't have a right to it is because they're not capable of speaking to the issue. And those of you who are talking about the right to control your own body, that is very true, but your body is what you're born with, not with that which is added onto it through pregnancy. You can get off that right now. Let's get back to the realities. So we are on Facebook with these discussions, and I hope you'll join us, where there are some really lively discussions taking place as we begin to try to get to the bottom of a lot of things that are taking place. And we've got to go around some of the networks that put in place to keep us from having these discussions, and use our own networks, which don't have to be licensed by the FCC in order for us to talk to each other. That hasn't been outlawed yet. We still have the First Amendment that, in fact, gives us the right to express our opinions. And until that's gone, we can, in fact, get around some of the alphabet soups that, in fact, are suppressing free speech by not bringing forth the information we need to have in order to discuss that which you have to discuss to live in a free society. We need to, in fact, do it through the networks we do have. And Facebook is one, and one I'm going to get into a lot more. I'm not on it as much as I should be, is Twitter. We have to develop that one as well and become more involved with that network. But right now we are doing a lot of things on Facebook. And I want to give a strong word of encouragement for the Drudge Report, which summarizes all the articles out there and gives us these narratives that are out there, news out there, and lets us know where we can go and find it. And some of the political pundits, we can go and read their spin on things, their particular narratives. and just kind of be an informed population so that we can begin to become the kind of people that will have enough information to hold our government accountable and have the kinds of things that we need to have in place to have a democracy that we're promised by the, not a democracy, but we're promised a republic by the framers. And we can't have a republic if we have citizens that are not informed about what's happening in their world, in our world. Our world, this world. What's that song by Gladys Knight and the Pips? You know that song they put out. We have to have some way of getting information about our world. We live here, and we're going to be here for a while. Hopefully, we're not going to all just go away through these drive-bys going on in Chicago and this other kind of craziness going on in these other cities. We plan to be here for a while. We got to be informed, and we've got to continue to navigate through the minefields to get the information that we need to have. Let me get off of Florida for a while. I want to talk about what's in the news right now. You know, we have the going rate right now are these discussions about Obamacare. And they have all these people, Democrats too. Democrats, you're the ones that signed the Obamacare, the 2,000 plus page disaster, this train wreck that you delivered to the economy, that now that it's time to deliver upon the mandates, of which you hired 16,000 additional IRS workers to enforce the provisions of this disastrous legislation. Now that it's time to implement this legislation that you passed when Congress was in the hands of the Democrats, both the House and Senate, and then you had control of the presidency, you passed Obamacare, which didn't have a single Republican vote. Not that they're against necessarily the accumulation of power in Washington, but they didn't vote for it, and therefore this baggage is now getting ready to come out and hit the Democrats. Now everybody doesn't want to run to the cover to cover up what they did, so as to escape the political fallout from this disastrous legislation. And what we have now is Democrats and Republicans trying to stop this train wreck going into 2014 midterm elections. And they ought to be more than heck to pay for what has happened in this case. But there's a larger point here to be made about Obamacare, and that is the government interference in the economy that is in fact not only slowed the economy down, but has in fact stopped it in its tracks. It's not just Obamacare, it's the interference in the economy by government. And all we see every time there's interference is the government coming up and stopping what would really be an economy that is still the model of the world if it was allowed to, in fact, do that which it would do and could do and has done before government got involved. I want to read something to you from one of my favorite writers, one of the great economists of all times, and that is Ludwig von Mises, who is, I think, the head of the Austrian School of Economics, the one that's put a stop on the economics that's put out by John Maynard Keynes, who has gotten so many people off in terms of what the capitalist system is really all about, and how you actually grow an economy through capitalism, which we now want to call it all kinds of dirty names that have nothing to do with capitalism. I've been saying for a couple of years now, there's no such thing, for example, as crony capitalism. I don't even know where that comes from, that you can have crony capitalism when capitalism is really the free market, and how you have cronyism in it, which does not have. It's government hands off, and how you have crony capitalism when the government keeps its hands off of the marketplace, and you can have cronyism without having the fiat power of the state. How that can happen is a mystery. It's unexplained by those who want to claim that it's possible. But I want to use Mises to explain why the United States was once the most dynamic country in the world and had the most dynamic economy the world has ever seen, and does not have either of those right now. I mean, there are countries that are freer than the United States right now is, and that was not the case. Certainly was not the case in the 19th century, and for the first 3 decades of the 20th century, up until the time we had the Great Depression, which if we had left the economy alone, let it recover even from that, we would have had an economy that would have recovered a lot sooner, and we would not have all these restraints and these chains on the economy right now. We had not, in fact, reacted the way we did to the Great Depression under first of all, under the Hoover administration, then it was carried out even more so under Roosevelt, and we've not stopped that train wreck yet. But let me read what Mises says is why we were exceptional. And America was exceptional, but I don't think you can claim it's exceptional now. And I want to read the reason why it was then and is not now an exceptional country, an exceptional economy. Here's what Mises says in the 66-page pamphlet called The Anti-Capitalistic Mentality. And Mises makes this point. He says the people of the United States are more prosperous than the inhabitants of all other countries because their government, meaning the government here, embarked later than the governments in other parts of the world upon the policy of obstructing business. So what explains the exceptionalism when it was in place of the United States is that the government here got out of the blocks of interfering in the economy at a later stage of its development than it was in other countries where at the very outset you have those governments interfering in the economies of those countries. I mean, you had, if you look back at the 19th century when industrialization was taking place, laissez-faire capitalism was invoked. Government leave us alone. Government hands off. Laissez-faire economics. This was the going rate in the 19th century. And as long as that was the case, you saw what happened here. Businesses were taken off. The restraints placed on it were not in place. And as a result of that, more wealth was produced in this country than the world had ever seen before. We had never seen this wealth in other parts of the world that had been seen here in the United States. And as they are talking about Obamacare in Washington, let's enlarge upon that conversation to understand what has happened in terms of the government hands on the economy right now. That was not the case prior to that. It's not just Obamacare. It's 170,000 pages of regulations put on the economy by these mercenaries in Congress.
Remember a few months ago when Obama said, to that the business owner, you didn't build that, somebody else did. Well, then some of the liberal, his comrades try to say, well, look, you have the infrastructure, the roads and all that. That's built by government. Yeah, by taxation coerced out of us so they can mismanage it. Nobody knows where the money's really going to, because if you look at the shape of the roads around here in Flint, something's definitely not being done with the money that they are taking it from the state on, on the sales tax of, fuel. So all these people are out there saying that the average person who starts a business owes everything back to somebody else. Then that can go back to that can be put on everybody. That argument can be put on anybody, but the politician more so than anybody because they don't create wealth; they just suck it off of somebody else.
Yeah, government, as Peter Schiff says, consumes wealth. They don't produce wealth. And I was really bothered by one video that came up along this line that was a video of a speech given by Keith Ellison, the representative from Minnesota. And he was actually making the statement right out in public that the wealth that these people have, he named Buffett and some of the others, these people that have accumulated tremendous wealth, and said that the government is not broke. It just is not, what he was really saying was that the government has not confiscated the wealth that's out there to be seized by the government. And so the government's not broke. It's going on $17 trillion in debt, but it's not really in debt. It just hasn't seen the wealth of the people out there that have all this humongous wealth that they should be in fact paying, because they should be privileged to be living in the United States. Look at all this wealth you accumulated here. And we just haven't gotten our heads on it yet.
Take all Buffett's money, because if you want, you remember last year he said that they weren't being taxed enough, but then he's got a lawsuit against the IRS over taxes.
Yes.
If he really felt that, he just write a bigger check. I mean, liberals, if you're listening, if you really feel that you are not paying your fair share, you're a wealthy liberal, then you can always write more checks. The IRS and the government will take them.
Yeah, I think that's Section D. That's Part D of a certain section of the IRS code. It says that you can always write for more than what you owe, and I've never seen these guys do that. They want to talk all this in the public about we're not taxed enough. Well, if you're not taxed enough, don't speak for me. I didn't say that.
Look at Obama. He just when his taxes are filed this last time, he took all the deductions he could, reduced his tax bracket from 33 to 17%. Okay, so they talk out of both sides of their mouth. These guys, Bill Clinton donated underwear to a charity so he could get a write-off. His underwear, so he could get a write-off.
Yes, and look what they did with Obamacare. Where with Obamacare, we're now getting Congress. We're now seeing what Congress is in fact writing legislation where they exempted from the Obamacare, which is nothing other than another tax put upon taxpayers. This is a tax haven that we're gonna. This is gonna be a quagmire for taxpayers once it's invoked. If they don't, in fact, if they don't rescind it and they don't defund it, we're in trouble. But they've already gone to preempt having to follow even that. So they pass it for us, and then they don't have to pay for it. 70% of it, 70% of their health care is still going to be covered by the American people, and so they don't have to worry about what they're doing right now, but it falls upon us, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. The rest of it is that they're just interfering in the economy in the first place. And those of you out there, by the way, who are fighting over working in these fast food restaurants, and you're saying, woe is me because we can't live on minimum wage at McDonald's and Burger King and Kentucky Fried Chicken and all these places when I don't leave windows out. And we just can't make it on this amount of money that we're making at the fast food restaurants, which are not really designed to give you a living wage in the first place. These are entry level, first rung on the ladder jobs, and they're not intended for you to stay there for the rest of your life and do a lifetime of service at these minimum wage jobs. These are teenagers' jobs. You ought to ask yourself the question, why are you consigned to those jobs? That has nothing to do with McDonald's. That has to do with these members of Congress that put these chains on the economy that keep it from expanding so that businessmen can do what they do, which is grow business and grow jobs and create wealth in the process, both for themselves and for the workers. And so your beef is not with McDonald's. You have to demonstrate against McDonald's out here talking about you want $15 an hour, which a sandwich at that point is going to be, how much would a sandwich cost?
Well, I heard somebody say like the Big Mac, up to $1 menu, not Big Mac, but the $1 menu at McDonald's, it'd only be like $1.37 after that, if they make it $15 an hour. I don't see how it's going to be that small amount. I mean, if it was, we could all live with that, but it's going to be all costs are passed on to consumers. These people cannot understand that. Those guys who create businesses don't want to just go to work every day so they can feel good about themselves creating jobs for people. Your job is a serendipitous occasion because somebody else pursued something that they wanted to acquire wealth with. That's it.
That's it. Well, they really don't understand, and of course the Congress is not going to tell them how the economy operates. And they say, well, McDonald's is making this much profit. Yeah, but how many of those machines and how many of those things that you are using to cook those burgers on, how much of your salary was taken back from you to pay for those capital investments that businesses must have in order to, in fact, maintain the job that you have, the wage that you're being paid? How much of your wage was, in fact, confiscated to pay for that? And the amount of profit that is in fact created, what that does is that it begins to grow other McDonald's around the company that employs more people, because they're not putting this money in their mattress. They're using this money to grow the business and expand the business so that other person can get those jobs at whatever the hourly wages that they're paying.
You know, I'd like to know this. People think that wealthy people just hold on to their wealth. Well, they try to, so they can invest it. Guess what? Because people who are geared towards making money will engage in that activity. So they're going to go down the road and take that money they acquired and through use of their money they've been paid interest on, and they're going to sink into another business. There's people who are greedy are going to make jobs for everybody else. Greed, I hate to say Greco was right in Wall Street, but greed is good. There's no way, if ands or ways around it. Well, other person's greed is how we get our employment, how we get our food, how we get everything we need. Somebody else's pursuit for their own
greed is what drives a person to produce anything. I mean, is he producing because he wants to serve my needs? No, his greed is there to serve his own needs. But the other side of it is that's not explained is that you can't be greedy and then accumulate wealth by just simply going in a room and announce, I want to be greedy today. You got to produce something out of which your greed can be actualized, so that you have to produce something that somebody's willing to pay for. You can't take it. The only greed I'm against, by the way, is the greed of the guy out on the street. You know, he has a gun in his pocket. He pulls it out, and his greed is in fact going to take my wealth without producing anything. Give me the guy that's greedy, that produces a service that I don't have to produce. I can go do something else, because there's somebody through his greed has produced a loaf of bread, and then I can go and buy the bread, which is serving his greed, and he gives me the bread, and I give him what Walter Williams says is a certificate of appreciation. That's greed.
The old man that used to run Cole's Furniture up on Dort Highway, we were up there buying some stuff. We bought quite a bit of stuff. My mom came into some money. We bought a lot of furniture. And we were putting the stuff in the truck. He helped us out, and he goes, he shook my dad's hand, shook my hand. He goes, love to see your smiling face, and God, I love your money. Yes, Dad and I just cracked up, and he was honest.
Yeah,
God, I love your money.
Those of you that got that money in your pocket, let me see you tomorrow morning when you get it for breakfast. Let me see you put that dollar bill in your mouth. No, what you did is that you gave that guy that dollar bill and whatever change it would cost. Maybe it cost more than a dollar. Maybe it's whatever the price was. You gave him the dollars, which you couldn't eat for breakfast, and then he gave you a product that he made out of his greed. He didn't make it because he knows you, and you don't know him. What that guy did, he got this morning and began to get his factories going to make bread, so that you have bread in the morning and he could get your money out of your pocket without, in fact, taking it from you. You voluntarily gave it to him. And by you doing that, you serve his greed, and you encourage him to be more greedy, because now he's got to think about, what else can I make in order to get your money out of your pocket?
Well, yeah, I love paying taxes so that money can be spent on Obama and his family and his wife's family going abroad, so they can get a great education by actually visiting places in history books. I just love the fact that they're taking my money for that kind of thing, you know.
And of course the government is not greedy. The government just confiscating money. What is the government producing after you get past, the streets and which we had roads and schools? We had that before you began to tax us into oblivion. And Keith Ellison saying that there's a lot of wealth out here. They just don't have their hands on it yet. Well, you have your hands on too much of it already, and we need to get your hands off of it. We need to stop taxing the American people by the government getting bigger and bigger and paying for more programs. We need to leave the money out here for the people that are producing something, and we're able to pay them for the service that they're rendering to us and the products they're producing that make us happy because they're producing things that we want. They can't make us buy that which we don't want. And I have never seen in the history of the United States, and I hope I never see it, where you have the coercive power to make me buy something I don't want. And those of you that's producing a product we don't want, we're going to punish you at the marketplace by, in fact, just sending you out of business. Get out of here.
Well, exactly what Obamacare is going to do. Even if they allow private corporations to stay in business, now because people are so wanting to avoid the tax or the penalty or whatever for not having it, those insurance companies can shove down their throats any policy that they can show proof of, so they're not going to get fined for not having it. So that it'd be just like total no coverage at all. So basically, the only people really benefited off of is not the consumer or the person who might need health care. It's the providers of it. Yeah, the only way the only way insurance company get away with it is they had a gun being leveled at the people's heads by the government.
Yes, I'm amazed, John, at the number of pundits that were looking at this way back when. Ayn Rand was one who saw where we were heading in terms of government eventually taking over our health care. Later on, President Reagan, I saw a speech of his they made in '71, and he was warning about the government taking over health care. And he was saying once you get the government taking over your health care, then the government is taking over your life. Because
they'll deny you. Look what they're already doing now. If they deny the processing for IRS paperwork for groups that are conservative, decidedly conservative. If they don't like your politics, you're going to be denied health care. I guarantee you.
Oh, no question about it.
It's going to happen.
The government cannot get involved in it with limited. As much money as they take from us, its resources are not unlimited, and at a certain point, you got to have death penalty. It goes with the territory, because if you have single payer costs, and it's all in government largesse, and they don't have all the wealth in the economy available to them, they have too much of it, they don't have all of it, then at some point they got to say no and restrict the persons in terms of rationing the service out, and then determining through the rationing what part of the population is going to get it. And of course the elderly, who have already made their contribution to the society, will be the first ones that they look askance at in terms of turning them down, and so therefore death penalties. It goes with the territory. And when they were criticizing Sarah Palin for having said that, now they're backing up and saying that, well, we made a mistake. She was right all along in saying that once you get Obamacare, you're going to necessarily have death penalties, and you are going to have it. And there's no getting around it, because what you have is more and more doctors going out of the medical field, very few going into it, too much paperwork, and that's driving people out of the medical industry. And then you're not paying them what the cost of doing business is, because government's only willing to pay so much for the service, because they're rationing it out, and then they're determining what the cost of the service is, rather than let the market determine that. So what is the ultimate and bottom line here? The bottom line is the government must in fact ration the care and therefore determine who gets it. That's just going to happen. And when Obamacare kicks in, if they do not in fact defund it, and they really shouldn't just defund it, they should in fact do that as a first step and then repeal this legislation. And then, you know what, the other thing should happen? Government should get out of regulating the businesses in the first place, because we got 300 million people who are regulators. Really, if the truth is to be told, all we need to have businesses do is follow the law, like everybody else does. We have certain laws that they have to pass. You can't kill anybody. You can't make a product that's dangerous. All of that is already on the books. But they want to regulate the businesses so they can't do this, and then get regulated so they can't do the other thing. And before you know it, you got 170,000 pages of regulations, which no business can comply with. In fact, I just got to reading on, of course, this came off one of those alphabet soup networks where they had this one guy. This is one person on MSNBC, and that right there ought to give us some pause, that was saying the government just now filed through Merck a $420 million claim against this business. And that shows you the government, by them selling out of court and paid $420 million, it shows you how far businesses have gone astray and how they get to be regulated. Well, you know what? You can claim that to be the case, but what that is the regulations that's causing that. Because the regulations are such, in terms of these antitrust laws, is that if you in fact follow this part of the law, then you are in violation of that part of the law. And they're coming here fighting these businesses is nothing but a shakedown.
Well, that's like the minimum wage thing. If people are saying they can't make it on this much per hour coming from their employer, you got to ask what rural taxation has. They're making them unable to meet their own requirements in their own life. I know that they're probably going to get a lot of that money back at the end of the year, but this money's still withheld from during the course of the year. A person making minimum wage. If that money is more available to them throughout the year, more of their needs would be met at the current wages they're earning. So the rural taxation is never addressed because that's something the politicians can create. And they don't always want to put they want to create the boogeyman to be the big bad businessman not want to pay enough.
Yes. The businessman is every society, according to Ayn Rand, in a book called The New Intellectuals, has to have a boogeyman. And in America, it's different people in different societies, but in America, the boogeyman is a businessman. And he's the one that they, in fact, want to blame for all the largesse that goes on in society that they're responsible for. If they unleash the power of capitalism in this country, you would have practically no unemployment, because the entrepreneur spirit will come out. But if you're going to tell me that a person ought to create things and then give the money to the government through taxes, what you're doing there is that you are de-incentivizing progress and productivity, because nobody's going to produce and then have to give that which is the benefit of that which they produce to someone that did not produce that wealth. They give the wealth away to those who are not productive. Who wants to produce under those conditions?
Yeah, well, I'd like to know this ever elusive fair share is, what it really means. Because they say, well, these guys are making money, and they're depending on the roads and all that. Yeah, well, also the people they're employing is paying the gas tax or the fuel tax to keep those roads allegedly in shape. So everything you want to go after is saying they're not paying their fair share. They're paying way more than what I would consider a fair share.
Have you noticed they never do talk about what that percentage is? They never quantify. Okay, fine. Okay, they're not paying their fair share. So, what is their fair share? And if they ever mention it, there'll be two problems that will come in immediately. Number one, you will see if they're already above that. Number two, you will identify the confiscatory aspect of that whole thing of fair share. Because what they're really doing is they're actually talking about seizing people's wealth. Because when you look at the numbers, and we talk about the numbers here a lot of times in the past, because we want people to know what the numbers are. You're talking about the fair share, and they never disaggregate. Okay, what are you talking about? Well, let us here at this studio mention what we're talking about. 1% of the top 1% of income earners in this country is paying 38 to 40% of all federal taxes paid in this country. I repeat. Top 1% of income earners, that includes Michael Moore. I don't know how much money he's hiding offshore, but you can bet that he's trying to avoid paying as much as he can.
Especially now he's going through a divorce.
Well, that's going to be half of that empire, $50 million.
Bye-bye, just kiss a goodbye, Mikey.
Half his empire then goes. You got to make another film against capitalism. 1% paying 38 to 40% of the federal income taxes in this country. The top 5% of income earners, that would then rope in another 4%. So then the top 5% of income earners would be paying 60%, really about 58%, but between 58 and 6% of the federal taxes in this country. And then the top 10% are paying 68 to 70% of the taxes. You know what that means? It means when you get past the top 10% of income earners in the country, the other 90% only have to pay 30% of the remaining federal taxes, which amounts to $2.5 trillion a year. And the federal government can't take care of its bills out of $2.5 trillion a year.
And how much is that of our GDP?
And the GDP is 15 trillion. So then here they have taken out of the economy $2.5 trillion, and then they are borrowing another $1.2 trillion, which means they're spending at that level then, at that time, $3.7 trillion, and then they're doing QE infinity, which is $85 billion a year, which is another $1.2 trillion a year. So here they are taking what they're really doing is consuming $4 trillion plus a year in money that they're spending, just consuming wealth and then throwing it out here for political reasons out here while producing no product and then blaming the businessman for the downturn in the economy. I'll tell you what you ought to do out there. You people out here confused out here talking about $15 an hour. Ask yourself the question, why you consigned to those jobs in the first place, and why you can't start out on first ladder rung jobs and then move up into another job. Why is that not happening? It's because of what we just talked about, taking money out of the economy and consuming it through government largesse, producing no product, not expanding business but contracting business, through which you're locked into those jobs for a lifetime. And those jobs are never intended to be a lifetime job. The blacks out there, I just read your statistic. 57% of all of the black youth in this country are unemployed. Think about that for a minute. In terms of the implications of that, in terms of the crime rate, and the fact that 3% of the population, that is to say, really 1.5%, because of the 3% I'm talking about are those between the ages of 16 and 29 that are driving the crime in the country. Therefore, that 3% of that is the population of blacks in the country, and 1.5% of that is, in fact, black males. So 1.5% of the population in the country is producing 49.1% of the crime in the country. Why is that? It's because of the fact that this consuming of the wealth doesn't create the job climate through which 57% of black youth are unemployed. And therefore, in that phenomenon, you have these children out here, these youth out here, involved in doing what? Out here tearing up their communities. But you don't attach it to the consuming of wealth by the government, just like they don't do it out there talking about $15 an hour. Don't see that you're at the throats of the wrong group. And when you get that $15 an hour, if they are silly enough to pay you $15 an hour for flipping a burger, because you pay people according to their productivity.
Another thing is too. Years ago, when my first show partner and I, his name was Larry Crescetti, we went downtown one time. We played people, and we talked to him down there. And we asked this one kid. Larry was a truck driver at that point, making a local truck driver. He was making like $11 an hour. So he asked this kid. He said, "This guy's identified himself as Slim, probably 19, 20 years old." And he goes, "Would you work for $10 an hour?" He said, "Well, I could, but I won't." And it's like, and there's, well, I've been on the road. I'm in a long haul trucker. I'm making $11.50 an hour, I think now. He said, "What makes you think you're worth that much? More than that?" He said, "How old?" He said, "Your skill, it's got to match your skill set." And the kid just didn't even answer him. But yeah, I could, but I won't. Well, if you don't have the skill level, you're not going to get paid well.
Sorry. You know what my salary was when I was in college? I worked in the summer. My salary, my minimum wage was at that time $1.25 an hour. But I was able to accumulate money in the summer, and by working during the school year part-time and playing baseball, I was able to pay my fees. And by the time I got out of school 4 years later, I didn't have any fee. I didn't owe anything. And really, let me just make this point. The job that I had was a farm worker. I worked at Green Giant in Belvedere, Illinois, 60 miles southeast of Chicago. I worked in Belvedere, which is in the Valley of the Giant, Green Giant. I worked in the I worked in. I had this rake. It's like a 4-prong hoe. It's like a rake though, and you pull the vines. They have this big machine, pull the vines, all the peas, and they set them down at this machine. You're outside, and you pull these vines into a conveyor belt. The conveyor belt takes them up there in this big turbine, and the turbine is spinning around because peas have gas in it. The gas, the turbine causes heat. The heat expands the gas in the hulls. The hulls open up. The peas come out. The rubbish goes out in the back, and the peas fall over to the side. and that's your P's. I did that work for $1.25 an hour, and I worked from 7 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning. I was so good at telling you about the time. I could tell the time by when the when the sun would start breaking through. You start seeing some daylight. And so about 4 o'clock in the morning, the daylight would come. And I knew I had 3 more hours out there working on the chain game. So Barry Belafonte, you saying that's the sound of the man working on the chain game. I was working on the chain game. That's the job that I did. And I did it for a time period. But what I was doing and working out there in the field, I was working for $1.25 an hour as a way of going to another job where my skill level would be different, where I'm now working later on at a job paying me more. And one time, before I retired from my job that I had for 39 years, my career, I might have been making $50 an hour. But I started out working $1.25 an hour. And you know, and by the way, the reason why we need, I say need, the reason why we have illegal aliens coming into the country, and we got them working out there picking those peas, and I picked tomatoes when the peas came in earlier during the summer. I do that part job there. I was in Beverly doing that job. Then the last part of the summer, as the tomatoes were coming in, because they come in at a later point, have a longer growing season, then I would go into Bridgeton, New Jersey, where Hunt's Tomato Company was. One of the plants was there. And I go over there and I pick the tomatoes. And after picking tomatoes for $30, no, not $30, 30 cents a basket. So I had to pick 100 baskets of tomatoes to get $30 out of it. Then we go and work in the factory when the tomatoes are picked. You go work in the factory where you can make a little bit more money at the factory job. And I worked that job for 6 weeks. So 6 weeks of picking peas, 6 weeks picking tomatoes, and in fact doing the Hunt's tomato paste and tomatoes, sauce. I made all of that. So but I was a farm worker. But I was there to make sure I moved from that to a full-time job that was in fact a career job. The reason why those jobs are not, why you need what amounts to illegal aliens coming in doing the job, is because the government came in and started paying people to go to school. You don't need those jobs anymore. So I blame the government even for that, by the government coming in and taking over the economy. Because I did not owe a dime when I finished college. You know what the going rate now is? If you come out of college right now and you only owe $25,000 thanks to the government, then you did very well for yourself. Because the average person coming out, not the average, but I know some are coming out with bills as high as $100,000, $200,000.
You know, another thing is, too, you got so many people at all these colleges here in Flint, because I went to both schools, Mott and U of M here in Flint. I knew so many people, and it's gotten worse, that just use money that they can get qualified for. They get the money coming in to pay for the classes and their books, and then they also get a stipend for living expenses. They just milk that along, and they drop out of classes. Then they sell the books back and keep that money. So they're basically using the system just to not have to go get a job.
They don't have, John. They don't have the government never gets the pipeline so that the money they're taking from us under duress, if we don't pay our taxes, we go to jail. But they've shown that they don't have any respect for the taxpayers, and that's one way in which it's shown. Because in the pipeline through which this money is being distributed out of the taxpayers' pocket into the coffers of the government, and then to those that didn't earn the wealth, and they're giving the money out to them, they don't have enough respect for the taxpayers to make sure that the pipeline through which this distribution takes place is in fact free of fraud, free of the things you just talked about in terms of how they do that, and in fact gaming the system. They don't cut that out. And then we see them over there dancing at the IRS and doing aerobics at the taxpayers' expense. They don't care anything about the taxpayers. It is really outrageous how disrespected we are. And then they bring these people in outside the country that break into the country and give them taxpayers' money on top of that. It's an outrage.
Well, they say, well, we owe it to them. Well, I wasn't even thinking about it. Was the jobs are lost. I mean, jobs are created because people are now given money to go to school. like you and I know other people that did similar jobs during the summer to pay off. And it was, I mean, you used to work a summer to pay off for the next next 2 semesters of school. You have a little bit of money left over, and then when you go back in the spring or summer, you'd work there until the spring and summer's over with to go back in the fall. And I know so many people who are older, like your generation, some of mine, old generation, because when I started school in 1981 over at Mott, the average, I think the per credit class over at Mott was $29 a credit hour. That's not a lot of money. But now it's way more than that.
I should have.
That was in 81.
I should have gone. You know what I was doing at that time? Because I was not as focused as I should have been. I liked education, so I was taking classes everywhere. If I had been on a program that was more focused, rather than trying to learn everything, taking logic classes, philosophy classes, political science, I was in all the areas because I just like learning. But if I had been focused, I could have gotten my doctorate degree and had money left over to pay for the car and things of that sort. But I was just, taking classes. But you're right, it was $29 a credit hour. Try to see what the price is right now. And all of that is in fact government induced. These presidents, Janet Napolitano stepped down from her job as the person over Homeland Security. Anybody feel safe out there? And she stepped down to take a job in California at some university. She was making $250,000 in a job in the government, and she's now going to be making 3 times that, where she's making $750,000 in some university as president. Now, how can they do that? Because the government is throwing all this money into the universities, so these persons are making more than the governors are making. In fact, they're making more than the president is making. The president's salary is $400,000, but look what they're doing in terms of how these salaries have been ballooned and blown up by the government getting involved in areas where it has no business being involved. And that is not by accident. Anything the government gets involved in, the prices, in fact, skyrocket.
I just checked here. The Mott's thing, Mott comparison, they compare it to Baker. Right now, to go there for a year, it's $4,799. Look how much that went up since 1981.
And I know what it was back in that day because I took classes at both Mott. I was just taking classes, and the U of M, taking classes there. I took classes at Wayne State. I've been to all the colleges, quite frankly, all the major colleges in the state, including Central Michigan University, Eastern Michigan State University in Ann Arbor. Been on all the college campuses. Because at that time, the price was not prohibitive, and you could pay it out of your pocket and go to class and take classes that you want to learn something in. And the government has gotten involved in it right now, where if you're not focused, you're going to owe your firstborn by the time you get out of school. You got to be focused in school right now and take that curriculum and try to get out as soon as you can to avoid the additional costs involved in getting an education. That's why they don't know anything.
Now, when I started at Mott back in 81, a class, say if you took 36 credit hours, it's like, that's a lot, because say per year, it was $1,404. Compare that to $4,000 and almost closer to $5,000. I mean, that's extraordinary jump.
Yes, it is. You know how many hours I had when I came out with my master's degree, my first master's? I had 90 hours for a 30-degree master's. Because I was just taking classes. I was just as happy as a lark. I'm learning. I'm taking classes. I didn't know this much in economics. I took this class under some of those professors. I learned this, and I went over there and took this class in logic. I learned something else. I was happy as a lark. Political science. I took those classes in political science. By the time I finally got around to, I need to get a degree here. By the time I got around to getting my first master's, I had 90 hours when you only need 30 hours. Then I took got another master's. I might have had 60 hours in my second master's. I had 120 hours, which really is what you need for the PhD degree. And I was just taking master's programs at that time because the price was not prohibitive. I wish I had that time back. I'd have 2 PhDs by now. But that was the going rate at that point, and I was able to afford it because learning was my hobby. It still is. But the government ended all of that, and by them getting involved in it right now, they created all these other things that are going on in the economy. We're blaming the wrong people out there. It's not McDonald's that's keeping your salary down. what's going to happen to your salary, by the way, is going to disappear, because they talked about they created 169,000 jobs in the last quarter. Well, those jobs, they found out 65% of those jobs were part-time jobs. So why is it that we now have an economy where we have part-time workers? Why is that? Obamacare, adding costs, layers of costs on the businesses, and driving up the cost of doing business. So what they're doing is responding by, in fact, trying to survive out there in a hostile business climate. So what they're doing is that they are responding to government regulations, and you're paying the cost of it and blaming businesses for it. The reason why you're stuck in those jobs is because government has restricted business expansion that grows the economy, to which you can move from that job, which is a first rung ladder job, to go to the next level job, which is what I did. The $1.25 job was entry level.
But by the way, the thing I quoted from Mott, that was for like out-of-state tuition. But if you figure, say it's around $3,400 for a in-district person. But if you add the books on top of that, it's going to be considerably more. If you add books on top of the out-of-state person coming in, it's way more. I mean, because, it's another probably $1,000 or better. So, I mean, just look at the cost, though. I mean, the rise of the cost, and it's because of so many people going on somebody else's dime.
Yeah, the government involved.
And they got to pay. They got to pay somebody. They got to pay the person who's paying out of their own pocket. It's got to pay for the person who's getting the college money coming from the government, because that doesn't come forthcoming real quick. It doesn't come. So they got to have money to operate on. So the person paying out of pocket now is paying more to keep the other people afloat.
That's right. And you can't even pay it out of your pocket anymore, and your parents' pocket either, because they have to pay their own bills. And this bill is more. This is a house payment. I mean, you're paying at Harvard, you're paying $52,000 a year. What are you paying for? A person up there talking, and you taking down the notes and regurgitating what he said and putting it on a test. That's what you're paying for, and that's $52,000. That's the price that you pay when the price goes up. I never paid when I was in undergraduate school, and I don't want to tell you what years it was, but when I was in undergraduate school, I never paid more than $1,000 for in a year, and I was taking sometimes 18 hours, and it didn't. And if I took 15 hours. Taking 15 hours was an insult to me. I know they talk about 12 hours now, and that's a full load. If I took 15 hours, I was insulted by that. I want to be in class all the time. So I was taking 18 hours. It was no additional cost to it. So I'm taking 18 hours. I had you have to have 124 hours. I had 141 hours when I graduated from undergraduate school. And I never paid more than $1,000 in tuition, not one of the 4 years I was in undergraduate school. And I paid it out of my pocket, plus I played baseball 2 years. I ran out of money. I had to find something else to pay. I mean, it did go up a little bit, so I had to find another way to pay for it. And I went out there and made the baseball team, because I knew I could hit that baseball, and you couldn't throw it by me, so I went out there and did that. So but when I came out of college as a poor kid, I was poor. I had holes in my shoes going to high school classes. Holes in my pants. I was poor. But when I came out of college, I did not owe the government one nickel, because the government had not got involved in the economy to the extent it has now, and it didn't get involved in paying the tuition to the extent that it has, and so therefore the price was not prohibited. I was able to pay it as a poor kid and come out debt free. Can't do it now, because government has come in, and now presidents of the universities making $260,000 a year, and their feelings are hurt if they're making that cost. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of this conversation. I do want you to follow what we're doing on Facebook, because there are some great conversations going on Facebook, and we are going to continue to have these conversations. We want you to join us. We're here at flinttalkradio.com, but when we're off the air, you can find us on Facebook, and want you to come over there and join in those conversations as well. And don't forget to tune in all the programs here at flinttalkradio.com, because we are working very hard to earn your trust. Until next time, I want you to, as always, follow your dream, Because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.